Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. Now, in what can be considered as a landmark judgment and success for the Independent National Electoral Commission, a high court in Ikodekwene in Akwa Ibom State, that's in South Nigeria, has sentenced a professor of the University of Calabar, Peter Ogwam, to 3 years in prison for announcing fake election results during the 2019 general elections. The professor of science, who served as the returning officer in the senatorial election in Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District, was said to have altered results from Orukanam and Etim Ekpo local government areas. Ogban told the court how the results of the election were falsified to give APC's candidate Godswill Akpabio an unfair advantage over the opposition People's Democratic Party's candidates. That's Chris Ekpenyong. Well, the professor was found guilty of fraudulent manipulation of election results, publishing and announcing of false results now, and was also asked to pay 100,000 naira fine in addition to his 3-year jail term. Well, hopefully this serves as a deterrent for electoral offenders and politicians as well. But then this is a landmark judgment, because this is the very first time we would have a very high-profile person actually convicted now for electoral offense. Joining me now to discuss this further is Omori Agbe, who is a public affairs analyst. He joins us from Abuja. And here in the studio, I have Libros Oshoma, who is a lawyer and a political affairs analyst as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me start with you, Agbe in Abuja. What do you make of this judgment?
Well, even though we all have to celebrate, if like you said, it's a landmark judgment, but interestingly, one would have expected more of those years in jail. The one given us is considerable. I think that the fellow ought to have gone more, at least 10 years in jail, to serve as a very strong deterrent to all of these manipulators of election results. It's not the first time we have seen this. You see what happened in Imo State, where a returning officer who was at gunpoint or under duress, as he said, was forced to manipulate results, and he did cry out, and the court, rather than listen to the man who was being at the center of the stage, who had come out with a clean hand to say, I did manipulate these results under duress, at the gunpoint, and I'm the one speaking, and the court said, no, it was okay. But this is also good that this is happening, that the professor in this case had to go in for it. And it's very important that we speak to professors who are well-respected individuals in our client, because in 2019 election, we did shout. We shouted that professors, you are manipulating results. You are helping politicians to sway the will of the people.
The point is,
but this is a very good one.
Do this, then where is the hope for the country? I mean, if professors who are considered highly respected people in society, who everyone actually look up to now, if professors would do this, then I really wonder where the hope is for our country.
So the thing is, it's not just all the professors, so that we don't just also generalize. Professors who were involved in that 2019 election, I just gave a scenario where in Imo, one of the professors declined to manipulate, but he had to do that under duress. A number of them had to go through some very strenuous measures to manipulate those results, including threat to their lives. But it's important, but for this professor of Calabar who did this, it's a shame. It's a shame because it's not the first time it's happening, because we also have cases we are still expecting that INEC does prosecute many of them, including the case in Imo State and elsewhere. So it's a shame. It's a shame. Right. It's a shame. ASU needed to speak up very loudly on this and criticize one of his own who has manipulated election results.
It's a shame. Let me come to you, Libros. One of the reasons why INEC decided to start using professors as electoral officers, or returning officers, if you like, is to ensure that you know, the whole process is transparent, and the belief is that these professors would do a better job, and that it will be difficult, for instance, for professors to take bribe and what have you. But that has not been the case, especially with this conviction. And we've seen cases where, you know, some professors too had been accused, even though they were eventually not convicted in court or anything. Cases were actually not brought against them. But this, how significant is this?
Yeah, it's very significant. And like you said, it's a landmark case in our electoral practices and election management. But that said, it is not enough for us to think that because they are professors, they would be insulated from the general malaise in our society. You know, just the same way we say, you know, judges also will not be insulated, you know, from the corruption and the cesspool you have in a society. So that's why you hear consistently that thugs, that we have a situation where thugs write election results for professors to announce, which is quite shameful. But here, I would want to salute the courage of the judge for not allowing himself to be swayed, because we've seen situations where you hear that, you know, because of those involved, in some cases, the case is warehoused and it never sees the light of the day, and then, or they just use adjournment, or the court is intimidated and they hands off the file and maybe remit it to admin judge for reassignment, and it suffers series of adjournment. I also want to salute INEC, the INEC chairman specifically, because I know that INEC before now do not take the prosecution of criminal matters, election malpractices seriously, because if they do, they would vote enough funds to prosecute them. What they do, they vote enough funds to prosecute election tribunal matters. But for criminal matters, you find out that in most cases they tell you they are waiting for police report, and the fee that are paid to lawyers sometimes is next to nothing, about 150,000 naira to prosecute a criminal matter. I think probably Professor Mahmood is doing something differently. That is why this is encouraged and the lawyers are able to see through. And then also, I would not also shy away from saluting the forthrightness and the strength of my friend Mike Igini. He has shown in this case, and consistently he's one resident electoral commissioner that had shown consistently, you know, that he's ready to sanitize the system. In 2011, when he was in Cross River State, Mike Igini saw to the prosecution of some persons who were involved in election malpractices. We also remember in 2015, when he was in Edo, it was only the state in South-South where the APC and PDP shared the votes. In other South-South states, it was just moonslide and landslide. And then now, in 2019, we have seen him also successfully prosecute a professor and then also dismissed 3 INEC staffs in Akwa Ibom. So all of these, I would want to, and then lastly, quickly, if you permit me, I also would not fail to salute the effort of the president or Mr. President he has shown consistently that he would not be involved in election malpractices. So what I want to call him to do with this now is to ensure that the man who was ordinarily supposed to be the beneficiary of this fraud, who is a minister under his cabinet, should be shown the way out, because the professor did not deny. He admitted the fact that, yes, these processes were flawed, but his only defense was that there was no police report. And the court said by virtue of section 150 sub 2 of the Electoral Act that INEC does not need a police report to prosecute, you know, an electoral offense.
All right, let me go back to Omori Agbe in Abuja. Do you think this will change the way electoral cases are prosecuted going forward? Are we likely to see more successes now in court on election cases going forward from this? All right, we'll try to reestablish contact. I understand Omori cannot hear me, but let me come back to you, Libros. Do you think going forward now, this case will change the way electoral cases are prosecuted? Are we likely going to see more successes now in court on electoral cases?
What the court had done for INEC is to lift the veil or the clog that had held INEC down before now,
which is the issue of police report.
Which is the issue of police report. And the court relied heavily on the Supreme Court decision in Chief Gani Fahimi and Akilu, said that the INEC does not need a police report to prosecute or to prefer criminal charges against anybody found, you know, violating its rules and regulation and committing electoral malpractices. So what's next now? The next step is for INEC to show strength of character, to show the fact that truly they are indeed ready and willing to prosecute. Once those two elements are present, that will encourage, that will further, embolden other resident electoral commissioners to take up, the mantle and prosecute.
Okay.
And I truly, like I said, I would want to encourage Professor Mahmood with what he had done, in collaboration with the resident electoral commissioner in Akwa Ibom. I think they should take it a bit further and also encourage, more transparent people, especially at the state level, to do the same thing.
Let me go back to you, Omori Agbe. Sorry, we lost contact there at some point. But going forward now, do you think as a result of this case, we're likely going to get more successes in court on electoral matters? And another important thing, it took, this happened in 2019. It took quite a long time to get justice in this case, even though the individual has said he's going to appeal. But when matters take that long, it doesn't leave one with much hope, so to speak.
Electoral, in fact, our legal jurisprudence, cases usually take forever, but the most important thing is that we get to the end of it. It is unlike the electoral matters that has specific timing of 60 days, 90 days, and all of that. So there's a time-bound processes. I think we need to begin to speak to the legal circle, particularly the court, the judiciary, the judicial council, to begin to think about reforms to these processes. This should be classified as an electoral matter too. It should be time-bound. When the case happens, it should not exceed a certain number of time. It encourages more people to blow the whistle against manipulators of results and the processes. And it's very important, like I said, that even though we do welcome this development, that we'll continue to support the electoral umpire to do the best they can do and to continually do by providing enough evidence to prosecute all of these election infractions in election. And this criminal element should be phased out and should be shamed from the Ivy Leagues of our universities. They be shamed from the educational system. They should not be allowed to teach in our institutions, because not just this professor, like I was trying to say in the first comment I made. If you look at the 2019 election, figures did not add up. You're asking my colleagues on studio the reason why they have to bring in lecturers into the system, because at that time Professor Jega taught that he is a professor. He knew the credential that professors and lecturers do have. Bringing them into the electoral system will increase the level of transparency. But that has not happened. That arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2. Some professors, some teachers, some lecturers could not even add up numbers. That is why you see the gap in terms of the total number of registered voters, which was about 84 million, and the total number at the end of the day when Professor Mahmood was declaring the election result was about 80 million. So what happened for about 4 million people? What happened to that number? Because of calculation. They are not able to put numbers together. If your number is not correct at the polling unit level.
Is this. Look, if we do not reform our electoral process and probably adopt electronic voting, we would continue to deal with problems like this. But this issue of having to count ballot papers, yeah.
Even if you adopt electronic voting, and it is these same people that are going to man those processes.
Well, but they are Nigerians. We are not going to bring
I agree.
angels from heaven.
What I'm saying is they are definitely going to compromise the process. That is why what we need is, people like the judge in Ikotekpene.
No, but don't you think what you need is a process that, that limits humans' interference?
Whether you look, let me tell you, in America, the process that limits human interference was compromised. So,
allegedly.
Yes, even if you limit human interference here, provided it is human that will impute the figure, it is human that will also, do the calculation, there is some way. But what we need is that, for here, there are no consequences for action. So what you need is, once you have a process in place, you need to ensure that there are consequences for any action or inaction. That is the difference that we are seeing here today. Before now, all the cases that INEC had reported to the police. How many of them saw the light of a police report? None at all. In most cases, they don't even look that way. INEC will pass buck to say we are waiting for the police to do a report and prosecute. And at the end of the day, the politicians compromise the police because of the porous state of our Nigerian police. But INEC now had been empowered by the court, the same court, to say it is right there in your law books. Section 150, subsection 2 empowers you to do prosecution, to prosecute. The same way that same section empowers you to hire external solicitors to represent you in election petition tribunals. What you need to do now is to ensure that you hire people that will prosecute these cases for you. By the time you prosecute 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the next time you are appointing a professor or even an honorary man to be a returning officer, he will look back and say, if I do not do this thing well, whether electronic or manual, if I do not do it well, I know that INEC will call after me. So no matter the pressure on him, whether at gunpoint or at stick point, no matter the pressure on him, he will look back and look to his family and say, I will not compromise this process because it is better for me to remain here than and spend the rest of my years in jail.
Omori, don't you think going electronic would help to solve most of these problems? Because this is a problem we've dealt with for ages, and the problems don't seem to be going away.
Yes, to be candid, I think we do need some level of automation, but we don't need internet voting. We stand strong on that. So what is electronic in this context is for a system that automate, that remove human error as much as possible, so the human being do not try to blame the errors on the other. Because if you check what happened in 2019, each one was blaming the error on the below. So the returning officer was blaming the error on the poll official. The local government official was blaming the error on the returning officer. That was how it came down to the national level, that the error transmitted from the polling unit up to the national level. But if you have an automation, if it doesn't sum up, there's an error notification and you can quickly deal with it. We are not asking for an act, because one of the fears that people have with electronic voting is that there may be possibility of hacking the system. We are not asking for transmission of results that could be hacked. That's not exactly the position. But electronic voting, where you vote using a device, it automates by itself. The results are printed out without necessarily having to count them manually. But what you really need to do, if you have to count a ballot paper manually, it must agree with the automation. So it means that at every point in time, there's a two-layer tabulation that helps to correct human error. There will always be human error. There will always be human error. Electronic intervention in terms of automation will solve the bit of the human error that we consistently see with our elections.
You want to say something?
Yes, I want to say that we look at this electronic automation as though it is not operated by humans. In Nigeria, we have seen how even humans compromise electronic processes. What I am saying here is, look at the Edo State election, for example. Let me tell you where rigging usually takes place. That was what also happened in Akwa Ibom. It is not at the polling unit. Votes are counted at the polling unit. Between the polling unit and the collation center, that is where the figures change. But if votes are counted at the polling unit...
And that's the reason why we say if this thing is done electronically...
Even if you do it electronically, somehow, somewhere, somebody can impute figures. But when all of us, what INEC did in the last election was to introduce what they call a ZPAC. ZPAC, everybody logs on to ZPAC. As the votes are coming in, people are seeing it. So, by the time it's moving from the polling unit to the collation center, sorry, excuse me, Omori, by the time it's moving from the polling unit to the collation center, it will be difficult to manipulate because everybody has seen the results, all the results from the polling unit. But when you talk about electronically, the automations and the figures will add up. A politician can sit down in the comfort of his home, have somebody like a Professor Peter, and they just impute figures and say these figures are automated.
The point, Liberal says.
No, this is where layers are. What you do is, when you have power to upload at the polling level, you don't have power to add up at any point. So it's adding up. For example, if at the polling unit will add up, people at the collation are only going to just aggregate all the polling units in the area, and it automatically automates. There won't be any human adding up. That's the whole idea. And it is not internet-based. Again, it is not internet-based, because the fear of hacking is actually very important. I understand where you're coming from. The idea of having people because when you give people power, you give somebody power to sign up and look at information. If anything acts up, the person who has that signatory to go on that particular platform level will be held accountable. So we can hold people responsible categorically. That's exactly what we're saying. So you don't have access to be able to edit.
Russians that hacked into their electoral system.
Well, but the truth is that we cannot continue to run the current system we have. We cannot continue to run that system. It needs to be upgraded.
See, it is too...
Yeah, go on, Omori.
Yes, I said it is very expensive. The current system is very expensive. There's a lot of human errors in it, and at the end of the day, they will blame you that they had not slept for 2 nights, so they didn't know what they were calculating.
No, this
as a matter of fact, if we had electronic voting here, I don't think the situation we saw with Professor Peter Ogban would have risen in the first place.
Exactly, the electronic we need, DJI still insists, the electronic we need is for all of us, no matter where we are in the world, to be able to see the process. Once we follow it through. That's electronic we need.
And the truth is that for us to be able to vote electronically as well, that's the way I think. For us to be able to vote electronically, people see everything. And
didn't we do electronic accreditation?
This whole idea of voting
and waiting, manipulate the process?
This whole idea of voting and waiting for several hours to know the outcome of the election just doesn't make sense.
It has to change, I agree.
It just has to change. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. I appreciate your contributions. Omori Agbe, who joined us from Abuja, thank you very much for your time. And Libros Oshoma, you're going to continue to stay with us because we still have one more issue to discuss with you. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it. Use it to take action. DEJI360, dissecting the issues.